called the Black Freedom Struggle. The Black Freedom Struggle includes a long list of movements that happened before and after the Civil Rights Movement that stretches from rebellions of enslaved people to slavery abolition movements to Reconstruction, all the way to Black Lives Matter movements today. Just like how Black Lives Matter is just one organization within a long list of organizations called the Movement for Black Lives. Just like there were internal conflicts during the Montgomery bus boycott, there were also internal conflicts throughout the Black freedom struggle. One of the most pernicious and divisive points of conflict was between Black leftist communists and Black centrist liberals. Not to be confused with left-wing or right-wing politics. You know what, kids? This is too important. Let's go to the Blackboard.
Now that's much better, kids. All right, so kids, just a little warning here. This is going to be an extreme oversimplification, okay? Now, let's look at here. Imagine that we are on an airplane, and the airplane represents U.S. politics. So, we have a left wing, and we have a right wing. Now, if you look down at the larger political spectrum, you'll see that not everybody on the left wing is necessarily on the left, kids, all right? You will see that most of U.S. politics falls between center-left and a little bit of the right, a lot of the right. The people who generally fall on the actual left, those are called leftists, right? And the people who are on the right are not called rightists because they're not right. They're called conservative. And the people in the middle are called liberals, all right? So for example, Obama is a liberal moving down. So people on the left are generally communists and socialists. People who are liberals and conservatives are generally capitalists, all right? In the Black history, people like Thurgood Marshall, MLK, and organizations like the NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the National Urban League. These people and organizations are generally in the liberal bubble. And then over here on the left, we have leftists. So we have people like Du Bois and Lorraine Hansberry and Claudia Jones and Paul Robeson and Ella Baker, Langston Hughes, Malcolm X just a little bit, Angela Davis, you get it. And other organizations that were Black organizations that were on the left included things like the International Labor Defense, which we're going to talk about later, the Civil Rights Congress, the Sojourners for Freedom and Truth, and of course the Black Panthers and Black Lives Matters today. What are the values of people on the left? All right, so we have the internationalists on the left, and we have people more focused on domestic issues on the liberal side of things, kids. Liberals are generally about reform and things like diversity and keeping the status quo pretty much the same as it is. Integration and inclusion. They believe in the American dream and individualism, the myth of meritocracy, and for them, success equals hard work, and that the hard work will guarantee you success. Voting and electoral politics are very essential to change, kids, and that change is slow and gradual. Liberals think that racism distorts America, whereas people on the left, they believe that racism is essentially American. They are more decolonial in their efforts. Instead of civil rights, they focus more so on human rights and world peace. They are about cooperation and mutual aid, a complete reimagining of society rather than a reform of the society. They advocate for things like environmentalism. Again, kids, oversimplification. A lot of these things overlap. And some of these values move from the center to the left and back and forth, as do some people within their lives.
So in America during the Cold War, being a communist was really frowned upon, kids. And being a Black communist with leftist value was not only frowned upon, but practically life-threatening. Black leaders had a range of political and economic views, but some found it safer to align with more central views over time to protect their organizations, protect their reputations as patriotic, lawful citizens, protect them from prison, deportation, protect their families, and even their lives. With that on your mind, it wasn't hard to remove yourself or resent or rat out or become frustrated with Black people who remained on the left and communist. Here's a clip from a movie called The Great Debaters about a black communist debate team instructor at a historically black college. The movie is based on real-life black communist teacher and world-renowned poet Melvin B. Tosin. Roll clip.
Mr. Tosin, when I came here today, I saw the sheriff outside watching your house. What is a communist doing teaching at a good Methodist college?
My politics are my business, Mr. Bird.
Father says I have to quit.
My politics are my business.
Well, I guess I have to resign.
It wasn't strange for black people to be communists, if not some kind of leftists, in the 20s and 30s. A lot of communist organizations supported the black community, especially the black poor kids. And communists advocated against Jim Crow segregation, lynching, black worker exploitation, and advocated for early black feminist organizations and movements, and many other progressive politics that appeal to working class black people. One of the most famous communist-led battles of the black freedom struggle is our second story for today, kids. The Scottsboro Trial of 1931, led by the communist-affiliated org, the International Labor Defense, and famous black communist lawyer William L. Patterson. Many people think that the civil rights movement started with the Brown v. Board of Education case, kids, in 1955. But the real beginning of the civil rights movement was the Scottsboro Trial, which exposed American racism to the world and opened the doors for the end of legal Jim Crow segregation. What happened during the Scottsboro Trial? In 1931, in Alabama, 9 young black men and boys were arrested for allegedly sexually assaulting 2 white women. Black communist and Moscow-trained lawyer William Patterson, the head of the International Labor Defense, took on the case. The case exploded, kids. It's caused demonstrations all over the world. The case centered itself around international working class solidarity. Protests happened in Berlin, Paris, Dresden, Cuba, West Africa. Even Albert Einstein said something. The case embarrassed the United States and exposed their racism on a global stage. At home, William Patterson and the mothers of the victims marched to the White House on Mother's Day in 1934, and they demanded full social, political, and economic rights for the Negroes. The International Labor Defense and Patterson were doing a great job internationally, but the NAACP didn't really want to get behind the case. Why? Well, history is hard, kids, which makes teaching history very hard, which is why it's very important for us to pay our teachers a lot of money. The NAACP leaders didn't exactly like defending people who weren't already sort of black, middle class, clean cut, and more acceptable to society. The Scottsboro boys were generally working class, and a lot of the NAACP leadership had classist views, despite the fact that they were black. The communists said black lives still mattered, even if they were poor. The NAACP's politics influenced their legal approach. The NAACP's Legal Defense Fund, known for people like Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall, appealed to the US to win the case, while Patterson and the International Labor Defense appealed to the oppressed of the globe. A difference in the political ideology and organizing strategy between the black leftists and black liberals can be seen in the way that we remember these historical figures. For example, Thurgood Marshall's biography is called American Revolutionary, while William Patterson's biography is called Black Revolutionary. The global approach of the Scottsboro movement was a prime strategy and theme of something that we like to call the Black Radical Tradition. The Black Radical Tradition is a phrase used to describe the long history of an ongoing process of radical, anti-imperialist, decolonial, pan-African liberatory efforts all across the globe, from Haiti, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Jamaica, Brazil, and more. Most important, the Black Radical Tradition sees an obvious link between the history of the Black freedom struggle here in the US and transnational efforts for freedom globally. It focuses not just on civil rights, but human rights. The international pressure not only won the Scottsboro case, kids, but it allowed a lot of black people to sit on juries when they couldn't before. And it inspired black union organizing and began the breakdown of Jim Crow U.S. apartheid. Around the 1950s, due to the Cold War, the Red Scare, rise in anti-communism, kids, and the McCarthy-era abuses of justice, black leftists like Patterson were jailed, deported, surveilled, deemed un-American, and silenced. Not just from speaking out, they were silenced from history. If you learn about black history at all, you mostly hear about black liberal history, the success of black liberal organizations. And you're told that more black radical militant organizations that came up after the civil rights movement were too angry or too violent or too radical. This distortion of the historiography of black movements is what critical race theorist Derrick Bell likes to call interest convergence. Interest convergence just states that in a racist, capitalist society like the United States, civil rights for people like black people only get passed when it serves the interest of the elites. It was easy for the US state to support black mainstream, seemingly middle-class striving, liberal civil rights struggle for integration and equal rights, as long as they didn't associate with or support the black left, who demanded more than the bare bones of US civil rights, and linked black freedom in the United States to global freedom. And as world-renowned rapper, poet, and singer Lauryn Hill tells us, kids, respect is just the minimum. The trade-off between black liberals and the state for civil rights in exchange for silencing or condemning the black left has been called the Black Liberal Compact. This opened the door for a kind of surface-level black representational politics, a gradual shift away from focusing on the black poor. Politics of distinctions were made between acceptable black people and those who weren't so acceptable. Black leaders became mediators or brokers between the white political power structure and the black masses. And it led to a lot of black leaders with nice smiles and empty words like change or hope, but generally hope for no real change in the global United States imperialist project. And worst of all, it weakened the political imagination of future organizers and activists. As author Charlene Carruthers says, an incomplete story creates incomplete solutions. So it's important that we don't just know history in cool quotes and highlights, but that we know the full, nuanced, long, slow, collective, not individual, intersectional movement history at large. Because, as Mariame Kaba says, kids, history is instructive not because it offers us a blueprint for how to act in the present, but because it can help us ask better questions in the future. And as famous author and professor Imani Perry says, single leadership cannot do what only community can do. Black Lives Matter.